listening to the Suave Lover podcast with your hosts, Benjamin Ritter and James Amaro. SuaveLover.com, advising gentlemen on the art of romance. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode.
They say that show me any incredibly hot girl and I'll show you guys sick of fucking her. Who do you think you would never lose interest in?
Like sexually?
Sure. What would the most interesting woman for you be like?
She would have to inspire and motivate me.
To have sex with her, presumably.
What's the end goal? But I think that sex just isn't about sex. Your sex drive is connected to a lot of other emotional circuits. So it's not just about wanting to have sex with her.
Well, and it's not necessarily just about wanting to have sex. I mean, a diminished sex drive is a very real thing that men face. Some of us aging men face. Some of us who aren't aging face. Your desire, your sexual appetite is going to vary, I guess, from time to time. What I'm riffing on is the idea that there's this one girl who I'm never going to lose interest in, and she's going to be perfect until I find her, and the girl I don't want to cheat on until I find her. Well, I don't know. I got to suffer. Life is full of these ups and downs of sexual desire, sexual appetite. Some people just don't have a very strong sex drive. So a very good friend of mine, he was happy if he had sex about once a week. And I looked at him like he had two heads. At that point, I didn't get that there were these sort of different speeds of sexual libido.
Then what do you say about the guy that found his one and only that he thinks and say they have sex every day?
Great.
And now they have sex once every 2 months.
And it starts to slow down because, so that'll happen. I mean, if you go in with unrealistic expectations, don't be surprised if you're disappointed. There's something a little peculiar about a loss of sex drive.
Yeah, it doesn't always represent a loss of your sex drive. It represents a different relationship component, intimacy, connection. What is the key indicator of a lack of sexual interest?
Being part of the family. I'm not interested in my sisters.
Incest? It was closeness.
Isn't that ironic and frustrating that you can find somebody so comfortable and become bored with them sexually because the sex brought you close to the point where now you think so highly that you almost prize them and you're like, well, I don't want to ruin this with sex. It's a funny way of thinking, but okay.
So what about if you're not in a relationship and you're just kind of like, wow, what happened to my sex drive? It's not really here anymore.
Well, I think we should disentangle two situations because I think there are people who are not currently having sex or not in a relationship or whatever, and their sex drive has gotten low. That can happen for a number of reasons. There are other people whose sex drive hasn't gone anywhere, but they're not sharing it. That's a different thing. So in other words, there are people who are not feeling sexual, and then there are people who don't express their sexuality with other people, but they're feeling totally sexual. Maybe they're just displacing their interest. This first situation where people have actually a legitimately lowered sex drive, they're not interested in sex as often, they're not thinking about it as often, that can happen for a lot of reasons. Not the least of which, very important, if not number one, is stress. Job, family, a tragedy, issues and circumstances in your personal life. Sex is not sort of like a fundamental need in the same urgency sort of as food. At least for some of us. Maybe if you're 18, it is. But for most of us, our basic needs include sort of a certain sense of well-being and a sense of security that we can then express our sexuality through. And if that's lacking...
Even food can be crowded out if you're doing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just like sex, even though it's a little bit instinctual.
Mm-hmm.
It
a little bit. Yeah.
Must procreate. It can be crowded out. And stress takes over your body. It causes fatigue.
Yeah.
You ache from it. It wears your mind out. The last thing on your mind is
impress this girl and get her
laid. The last thing,
right.
and it's work. Stress in general makes you want to do less work. Right? Unless the stress is I need to get my work done. So if sex isn't diminishing that level of stress, that plague of I must do this right now, or I have this move and all that stuff, if it's not going to diminish it, it seems like an addition to the stress. And so your body kind of shuts down the energy to that area of your mind and body. You're just kind of like, yeah, I think she's kind of hot, but I really could not even think about doing anything sexual.
The Essentials by Benjamin Ritter is your concise manual for life improvement and success with women. The Essentials has been called a straight-to-the-point lesson in the lost art of being a man. Packed with insights, this book will transform the way you think about dating and relationships. Get your copy of The Essentials by Benjamin Ritter at Amazon.com or in select bookstores today.
If you're under stress to begin with, then and you're dealing with anything like approach anxiety or sexual anxiety or whatever, the added stress will become unappealing, incredibly unappealing. Sure, absolutely. And so now you've got things that are compounding, and everything seems overwhelming, and the only thing you want to do is sort of avoid it. Okay.
It's funny because you look at other emotions too. You look at depression and anxiety. Again, you're crowding out other needs.
Well, depression, I think, is a little bit frustrating because it's a little bit different in that whereas stress, you can externalize it, you can place it on something.
And you can work through stress.
Yes, right.
Depression and anxieties, some are a little bit
they can be chemical. If you're
chemical.
Clinically depressed, boy, that's a hard one to shake. You can't circumstantially change a clinical type of a depression.
You can't make a to-do list and get rid of it.
Right.
It's a little bit more introspection has to be done.
Right.
People that I've spoken to in the past know they're depressed.
Yeah.
And it's sad because they know they're depressed, but they don't know what to do about it.
No.
And it takes their urge and drive away from pretty much everything.
Every person is entitled to a certain level of cyclic depression. I mean, right now we're getting into the coldest and shortest days of the year, and you're entitled to a little seasonal lows. All of that is pretty par for the course. There's no big deal there. It's when it's a pervasive kind of like a clinical depression or a long-term depression. We know empirically that the biggest causes of frustration in a marriage are things like stress, money, financial stress, raising kids, so sort of situational stress like that. We know that causes a tremendous strain, and of course, sex is meant to reinforce and build a kind of closeness. So when you've got that distance, that stress, that depression, that lingering kind of malaise of, I mean, it's hard to describe because I've been there. I've been plenty depressed. I have the seasonal stuff where I got to get my light to go on in the morning to get out of bed to help deal with the fact that it's so dark and gloomy. But when you're feeling that all of that stuff there, it's tempting to believe that it's never going to get better and there is nothing that you can do.
And also then now you're stressed and depressed about all these things. All of a sudden you don't have a sex drive. So you start getting anxious and depressed about the fact that you don't have a sex drive. And it just compounds on itself. And the first step is to just understand that this could probably be the cause.
Yeah.
To not be too concerned.
Really, it's going to be okay. Stress is par for the course. Depression is a normal thing that people experience. Depression is no longer the kind of thing that we need to talk about in hushed tones. We don't need to be embarrassed about these things anymore. If you have a reduction in sex drive, if you're feeling depressed, if you're not feeling that sexual urge, which, by the way, then can start to play mind games with you and make you feel like less of a man. I mean, there are some people who just aren't sexually expressive. That's fine.
You don't have to meet someone else's sexual expectation of you.
Right.
And your sexual drive can change and alter as you go through things and get older, and you don't have to meet society's or whoever's expectations.
You were saying that you had a diminished sex drive at one point fresh out of a relationship, right? Caused you some sort of like self-identity frustration.
Yeah, and I was concerned about it. I didn't understand it.
Yep.
I would get into sexualized situations and not really care about them.
Let me be clear what a sexualized situation is. Laying naked in bed next to a girl.
And I looked into it and I researched that.
Wait a minute, let me make sure. You were laying naked in bed next to a girl and it didn't seem sexualized.
On top.
Yeah, right, okay. On top. And it didn't feel Like you organically didn't feel the sexual urge that you would expect.
I was searching for it to light some sort of spark that I wasn't
Yep.
feeling
Right.
at that point in my life.
Yep.
And I went through some really great personal exercises
Mm-hmm.
to start perceiving the world around me in a more sexual way.
Mm-hmm.
Because of whatever I was going through, stress, or if it was school, if it was depression or anxiety, whatever it was changing the lens that I was viewing the world.
Yep.
And I had to overdo my perception of sexuality around me, making situations sexualized that weren't, in a way, and finding traits about people sexual that really I wouldn't have, to try to kind of
Trigger the attraction
again and trigger my mind into a more sexualized state where even being naked on top of a girl didn't trigger.
Listen, I get that, because being desensitized by the continual ka-thump, ka-thump, ka-thump of too much porn can make it so that the sort of the even mere copulation just doesn't even feel like an erotic experience. And not unlike that, I found that late night fucking for me has become a chore. I found that staying up late and, trying to seal the deal at 2 or 3 in the morning is like not pleasant, not erotic, not exciting, that I really like to take my time, probably before midnight, maybe well before midnight. And I thought for a while there that I was having ED. And sure felt like it. I was having a hard time keeping it up at 2 in the morning. And as much as anything, it's because I didn't find the whole circumstance, the whole experience pleasurable. I thought I had lost my sex drive. I thought I had lost my mojo.
Because you could have your mojo in the morning when you wake up, and then it
was standing right there saying hello.
It's 11 or 12 later on at night, and you're just like, I just want to go to bed.
Yes.
I want a burrito. You know, I want to go to bed.
Yeah.
And it really is that sensitive. It's not that 16-year-old hard-on that can just fly up, when an air lightly brushes your leg or something.
No, that was great, being 16 and getting hard at the right.
I remember being in like junior high and having to sit down in the hallway because
Right.
I hugged the girl too hard. So you can, you mentioned before that you can desensitize your sexuality, but you don't feel sexual in maybe a normal everyday situation.
Right.
And on the other end of the spectrum, you can have a lack of sex drive due to just lack of sexual experiences and use, where the fact that just like, let's say you're not good at math problems, you don't do math problems. When you look at a math problem, you're like, fuck that. Well, if you don't have sex, a lot of times you stop wanting to have sex.
Those pathways aren't being traveled.
So
right?
you're not connecting the neurons that normally connect. And then, of course, you could just be on medications. And so all these things can severely affect your sex drive.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you or anything is wrong with your sex drive. It just means at this point in your life, there's something going on that is getting in the way.
And the simplest way to start to address it, because this isn't going to magically solve it. If you're dealing with something that's chemical, you're probably going to have to see a doctor. But the simplest way to start to address it is to make it a priority. If sex is not a priority, look, I got so much other shit to deal with. I got a promotion, I got a job, I got to study, I got whatever. If sex is not a priority, well, you've kind of determined your own outcome in advance. You've made it so that it's not a priority. It won't be a priority. The self-fulfilling prophecy kicks in, and now you start feeling bad about yourself because your sex drive was lowered, but then you lowered it. So now you're the agent rather than sort of the victim of this, and you start feeling bad about yourself.
How to Start a Kinky Relationship by James Amaro is the definitive guide to successful alternative romantic relationships. The book has been called 50 Shades of Grey for Real People. Educational, informative, and irreverent, this book has something to offer anyone who is curious and sexually adventurous. Get your copy of How to Start a Kinky Relationship by James Amaro at Amazon.com or in select bookstores today.
So how do you prioritize without making it a chore? It's like, okay, Sunday morning, I wake up, I clean the house, and then I have sex real quick, and then I go to
with
the gym.
who?
Yeah.
The first thing that I've done that's really helped a lot
Well, the cleaning lady
is to romanticize it. And I mean that. I mean get into the fantasy element, the erotic element, the play element of sexual pursuit. If you can't engage the game of sexual pursuit, if it needs to be sort of transactional, it'll feel pornish, it'll feel prostitute-y. I like a playful, let me be clear, a very rough kind of playful, but a playful kind of sex. If you find that you're just turned off by the idea of finding a partner, I think now you've got something to work with. That is something to address. Ideally, if you find that your sex drive is low, probably it's because nobody or no constellation of women have sparked it for you. Let's spark it. Let's start with you, and let's romanticize the pursuit.
Yeah, you have to make sure that you're just not afraid of meeting women, and so you've kind of turned your sex drive off.
It's very different, right? If you're suppressing it because you've got this apprehension about women, I can imagine a lot of people who maybe claim, I don't have a sex drive, but in fact, sex drive ain't got anywhere. They've substituted it with porn. They've repressed it because of a fear of judgment. They don't want to deal with the bullshit of meeting people. That's a different thing.
So by prioritizing, you basically are now making the need greater. So you're turning off the porn. You're pursuing. You are probably timing it more appropriately. So if you know you're going to be tired at 11 or 12, you wake up in the morning, you're going to happy hour to meet someone.
You bet.
Or you are going to meet someone that you already know you're going to have sex with at an earlier time. Or you're not making it a chore. You're not having substitutions. And sometimes you just have to get the ball rolling. You're not laying on the couch wallowing in a way. And doing is always better in that sense if you're kind of depressed and you're not really feeling it.
Yeah.
What is it? Objects in motion get laid?
I think that's how Isaac Newton described it.
Oh, yeah.
Objects in motion tap ass. Isaac Newton, of course, famous scientist, inventor of calculus, among other things. He was, by choice, celibate. There are people who are, by choice, celibate. I bet if he were subjected to the charms of a lovely young woman, Isaac Newton might have succumbed. And for maybe a young man, I don't know Isaac Newton. It could have been, I don't know. I have no idea. But he withdrew himself to do things. Now, I think that's noble. I also think none of us are Isaac Newton, so we don't have to use the fact that there are people, there are monks, there are priests who withdraw themselves into celibacy, but they aren't role models for the most of us.
Isaac Newton just did that for less distractions.
Sure.
To get women off his mind, because women are evil. No.
Distracting for sure.
No, women are sex is distracting. Yes, it takes time. But we never would know if maybe he just did it because he was not very confident in himself.
Yeah, it could be.
And a lot of times I've noticed with clients, they withdraw from meeting women and their sexual side because they don't want to experience rejection. You just want to make sure that you're not suppressing your sexuality. One really amazing thing about sexuality, like everything else, is
that you can buy it on a black market. That you can buy young women from Russia as brides. That's amazing about sexuality.
Right?
If you just don't have much of a sex drive, but you want a beautiful Russian bride, I suppose that you could just strap something on.
You just pop up Bill.
And do performative, unaroused, unengaged sex.
Would that train you to have regular sex?
Yeah, I don't know, because listen, if your body is doing the motions and you're not feeling it, I think that part of it is, do you remember as a boy where you crushed on some girl, let's say in high school, and all you needed to do was think about her hair, smell her hair, something like that, and you just sort of wet your pants, man. It was like, right.
Keep her around you.
Right. I think what happens is, as we get used to those experiences, as we age, we desensitize to the eroticization of sort of our experiences with these women. We don't eroticize the mere experience of pursuit. And I think that causes a tremendous amount of frustration because sex becomes performative, it becomes copulatory, it just becomes sort of disengaged. And then when you notice it, it just feels kind of like you popped a pill, you got the erection, you got it done. And it doesn't feel like whatever that tingle was when you were a boy.
That tingle was because it came from you. It came from your mind.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of sex drive and depression and anything is you control how you feel ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can figure out how your circuits are wired, or if you can figure out how to defibrillate
Mm-hmm.
your own mental sex drive, you can reawaken it and you can get it beating again stronger, because you ultimately, by how you think and by how you act, are controlling how you feel.
Yeah, look, if somebody's got lowered sex drive, I don't care. Like, intrinsically, I don't feel like everybody should go out and be sexual. But what frustrates me is the sense that people are disconnected, alienated from their own sexual desires, that they're repressing some stuff, or that they're not expressing their sexuality. That bugs me, because that creates unnecessary shittiness for everybody's well-being. And to me, a couple of things that induce this. Pornification, man. Porn is everywhere. It's really easy to rub one out to porn. And it's not just porn, although a lot of it is. It's also like fantasy. I mean, if you can't get your fantasies met because you have idiosyncratic fantasies, and I can tell you as somebody whose actual sex life is very unconventional, that my fantasy life is all the more so, and that plain vanilla sex to me is about as attractive as a math quiz. I mean, it's just really not very engaging.
Also, you know those girls that take, well, you know every girl that takes a selfie and looks unbelievably amazing. She looks like she's just the hottest girl that you know. And then kind of scroll through her photos a little bit more, and then you get to the one where she's just kind of standing there normal on a beach without a filter on.
Yeah.
Porn is like a living selfie. Like it's like I have done my makeup perfectly. The video lighting is perfect. The video editing software is making all these women look unbelievable.
And importantly, in porn, no smells, no cigarette breath, no
sounds,
no weird sounds, no unexpected smells coming from down there.
I have
because
to pee.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So as soon as you get the disillusioning reality, can be a setback.
Weird illusion of how sex is going to be. And if you jack off more than you have sex, you're conditioning yourself to porn.
Yeah, just think of it as Pavlovian classical conditioning. You have a very sort of specific template for what turns you on. Your reward centers are being triggered, and now you meet a beautiful girl who doesn't have whatever porn features, the big badonk that you have just become fixated on. She's not wearing the cheerleader outfit, so now it's somehow not quite eroticized.
But even the view's different.
Right.
And so even just think about it, how the camera angle is in porn. You're visually seeing something completely different when you're having sex to when you're jacking off to porn.
Yep.
Completely makes sense that it would desexualize you to reality.
You may have performance anxiety. I mean, maybe you do finally get the hottest girl, your porn star other, and you know that the guys in porn, you probably know, they all pop a pill before they go on set. They have fluffers. They have manly prestige. And now you're a little apprehensive, maybe because you got a gut, or maybe because you're not as well endowed, or maybe because, you know, with the other girl, she didn't notice, but I wasn't always fully hard the whole time, and all this other kind of stuff. That anxiety starts to fuck with you, and you're no longer present to the girl. Whoa, the worst thing that can happen when you're naked with or in somebody is for you to want to be somewhere else. That's probably the worst feeling for the both of you. I mean, the best sex, arguably, I believe, is that present, immediate, just urgent, visceral, animalistic almost sexual attraction, where you're just drawn to each other. You're so present. That's a totally altered state. And when you're not there, when you're just so self-conscious and apprehensive and anxious in the act of copulating, or you know you're going to be, because it's happened to you a couple times, this whole thing will throw a fucking monkey wrench into all your mojo.
So after you close the computer screen, if you know you want to respark your sexual drive, you decrease the porn use that much. You focus on what gets you off, what turns you on. So you know that a certain type of girl is going to turn you on. start spending more time with that type of girl. Start calling a girl that you know is going to flirt with you on the phone. Start making your daily life more sexual. So instead of just saying hi to the cashier at Starbucks and walking away, start flirting with her. Notice certain parts of her that turn you on. And you're viewing now the world in a different kind of lens, like we mentioned earlier. And you're becoming more of a sexual person instead of a 9-to-5 zombie that goes home and then jacks off and goes to bed.
Yeah, a 9-to-5 zombie that jacks off and goes to bed.
Do you think zombies have any sort of sexual needs?
I can't imagine how a brain-eating zombie is going to focus on the copulatory element of eating brains. And they just eat brains. Like, that's it.
What if they ever get bored of eating brains?
Because,
Maybe they have too much stress.
Because they're too close to the brains that they're eating.
They're probably just really stressed out. About
they're in that brother-sister brain relationship with the...
Totally too close. Just way too stressed out all the time and anxious.
About being zombies.
Zombies need to stop watching porn.
See, I think about porn. It's an excellent tool for you to zero in maybe on what you like. It's when the tool becomes a crutch, a substitute, a reason to make excuses that you can tell you're overdoing it. I don't have an opinion about porn. I mean, other people have a strong opinion one way or the other. If your use of porn has interfered with your sexuality and you want to change that, the agency is yours. I mean, I think it's yours to choose and figure out what to do. But as soon as you find that to be the case, be careful about the amount, the way, how you're consuming the porn, because as soon as it's a sex surrogate, it will be cheap, it'll be easy, it'll be like a little jolt of heroin, and you're going to get your fix, and you're not going to be satisfied any more than a heroin addict looking for the next fix is satisfied.
So what if I have a decreased sex drive and I don't want to watch porn?
Well,
I literally just don't care. And that's probably stemming from other issues like depression and anxiety.
Probably. I mean, there are people who just have a low sex drive, and some of us, if you're dissatisfied with it, I suppose. I mean, suppose you are dissatisfied because, like, if you're a happy asexual person, good on you. Watch The Simpsons and knock yourself out. But if you're unhappy and you don't know what is causing your disaffection with sexuality.
Do you think porn would be a productive tool for someone that maybe wanted to be sexual but just had no interest? He was kind of sitting at home and he doesn't even want to watch porn. He just no interest, no sexual thoughts flow through him whatsoever. Other than the fact that, man, I really kind of I want to be a man again in a way for him. His definition of a man includes sexuality. Would porn be a good tool to help jumpstart it?
Well, it'd be better if he went out and, like I say, romanticized the world. Go out and pursue that romantic potential encounter, looking for something to eroticize, I guess, at a bar. Fuck.
Yeah, right.
Right? Or
Starbucks.
Or at a Starbucks.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this before. And to then start talking to people, start flirting with people, and start looking at them in a sexual way.
But that is what I'm getting at when I'm saying eroticize, romanticize. Yeah. It's flirting. It's being playful and going into that headspace that this is fun.
Yeah, and we talk about how to communicate and have conversations in previous episodes, but you can always hit us up and send us an email. Hey, what's our email again if they want to hit us up?
youporn@suavelover.com.
You have been listening to the Suave Lover podcast. Visit suavelover.com to become the kind of man that women crave.